to you we drain our cups of wine." And all the palace rings with happy songs, and with the grateful prayers of all the people, and sorrow in that city is not known. But pleasure always is alloyed with grief, and sorrow mingles in the joyous hour. While the king Aegeus and his son rejoiced, Minos prepared for war. He was invincible in men and ships, and stronger in his rage to wreak due vengeance on the king who slew his son Androgeus. But first he sought some friends to aid his warfare, and he scoured the sea with a swift fleet, which was his strength. Anaphe and Astypalaea both agreed to join his cause, the first one moved by promises, the second by his threats. Level Mykonos and the chalky fields of Simois agreed to aid, and Syros covered with wild thyme, level Seriphos, Paros of marble cliffs, and that place which Arne, the impious Siphnian, had betrayed, who, having got the gold which in her greed she had demanded, was changed to a bird which ever since that day imagines gold its chief delight, a black-foot, black-winged daw. But Oliaros, Didyme, Antinos, Gyauros, Andros, and Peparethos, rich in its glossy olives, gave no aid to the strong Cretan fleet. Sailing from them, Minos went to Onopia, known realm of the Aeacidae. Men of old time had called the place Onopia, but Aeacus styled it Aegina from his mother's name. At his approach an eager rabble rushed resolved to see and know so great a man. Telamon met him, and his brother, younger than Telamon, and Phocus, who was third in age. Even Aeacus appeared, slow with the weight of years, and asked him what could be a reason for his coming there. The ruler of 100 cities sighed, as he beheld the sons of Aeacus, for they reminded him of his lost son, and heavy with his sorrow he replied, "I come imploring you to take up arms, and aid me in the war against my foes, for I must give that comfort to the shade of my misfortuned son, whose blood they shed." But Aeacus replied to Minos, "Nay, it is a vain request you make, for we are bound in strict alliance to the land and people of Cecropia." Full of rage because he was denied, the king of Crete, Minos, as he departed from their shores, replied, "Let such a treaty be your bane." And he departed with his crafty threat, believing it expedient not to waste his power in wars until the proper time. Before the ships of Crete had disappeared, before the mist and blue of waves concealed their fading outlines from the anxious throng which gathered on Oenopian shores, a ship of Athens covered with wide sails appeared, and anchored safely by their friendly shore. And presently the mighty Cephalus, well known through all that nation for his deeds, addressed them as he landed, and declared the good will of his people. Him the sons of Aeacus remembered well, although they had not seen him for some untold years. They led him to their father's welcome home, and with him also his 2 comrades went, Clytus and Butes. Centre of all eyes, the hero still retained his charm, the customary greetings were exchanged, the graceful hero, bearing in his hands a branch of olive from his native soil, delivered the Athenian message, which requested aid and offered for their thought the treaty and ancestral league between their nations. And he added, Minos sought not only conquest of the Athenian state, but sovereignty of all the states of Greece. And when this eloquence had shown his cause, with left hand on his gleaming scepter's hilt, King Aeacus exclaimed, "Ask not our aid, but take it, Athens, and count boldly yours all of the force this island holds, and all things which the state of my affairs supplies. My strength for this war is not light, and I have many soldiers for myself and for my enemy. Thanks to the gods! The times are happy, giving no excuse for my refusal." "May it prove so," Cephalus replied, "and may your city multiply in men. Just now, as I was landing, I rejoiced to meet youths, fair and matched in age, and yet I miss among them many whom I saw before when last I visited your city." Aeacus then groaned, and with sad voice replied, "With weeping we began, but better fortune followed. Would that I could tell the last of it, and not the first, giving my heart command that simple words and briefly spoken may not long detain. Those happy youths who waited at your need, who smiled upon you, and for whom you ask, because their absence grieves your noble mind, they've perished, and their bleaching bones or scattered ashes only may remain, sad remnants, impotent, of vanished power, so recently my hope and my resource. Because this island bears a rival's name, a deadly pestilence was visited on my confiding people, through the rage of jealous Juno flaming for revenge. This great calamity at first appeared a natural disease, but soon its power baffled our utmost efforts. Medicines availing not, a reign of terror swept from shore to shore, and fearful havoc raged. Thick darkness gathered from descending skies enveloped our devoted land with heat and languid sickness for the space of full 4 moons. 4 times the moon increased her size. Hot south winds blew with pestilential breath upon us. At the same time the diseased infection reached our needed springs and pools, thousands of serpents crawling over our deserted fields defiled our rivers with their poison. The swift power of the disease at first was limited to death of dogs and birds and cattle, or among wild beasts. The luckless ploughman marvels when he sees his strong bulls fall while at their task, and sink down in the furrow. Woolly flocks bleat feebly while their wool falls off without a cause, and while their bodies pine away. The prized horse of high courage, and of great renown when on the race-course, has now lost victorious spirit, and forgetting his remembered glory, groans in his shut stall, doomed for inglorious death. The boar forgets to rage, the stag to trust his speed, and even the famished bear to fight the stronger herd. Death seizes on the vitals of all life, and in the woods and in the fields and the roads the loathsome bodies of the dead corrupt the heavy hanging air. Even the dogs, the vultures, and the wolves refuse to touch the putrid flesh, there in the sultry sun rotting upon the earth, emitting steams and exhalations with a baneful sweep, increasing the dread contagion's wide extent. So spreading with renewed destruction gained from its own poison, the fierce pestilence appeared to leap from moulding carcasses of all the brute creation, till it struck the wretched tillers of the soil, and then extended its dominion over all this mighty city. Always it began as if the patient's bowels were scorched with flames, red blotches on the body next appeared, and sharp pains in the lungs prevented breath. The swollen tongue would presently loll out, rough and discoloured from the gaping mouth, wide gasping to inhale the noxious air, and show red throbbing veins. The softest bed and richest covering gave to none relief, but rather the diseased would bear himself to cool his burning breast upon the ground, only to heat the earth, and no relief returned. And no physician could be found, for those who ministered among the sick were first to suffer from the dread disease. The cruel malady broke out among the very ones who offered remedies. The hallowed art of medicine became a deadly snare to those who knew it best. The only safety was in flight, and those who were the nearest to the stricken ones, and who most faithfully observed their wants, were always first to suffer as their wards. And many, certain of approaching death, indulged their wicked passions, recklessly abandoned without the sense of shame, promiscuously huddled by the wells and rivers and cool fountains, but their thirst no water could assuage, and death alone was able to extinguish their desire. Too weak to rise, they die in water they pollute, while others drink its death. A madness seizing on them made their beds become most irksome to their tortured nerves. Demented, they could not endure the pain, and leaped insanely forth. Or if too weak, the wretches rolled their bodies on the ground, insistent to escape from hated homes, imagined sources of calamity. For since the cause was hidden and unknown, the horrible locality was blamed. Suspicion seizes on each frail presence as proof of what can never be resolved. And many half-dead wretches staggered out on sultry roads as long as they could stand, and others, weeping, stretched out upon the ground, died in convulsions as their rolling eyes gazed upwards at the overhanging clouds. Under the sad stars they breathed out their souls. And oh, the deep despair that seized on me, the sovereign of that wretched people! I was tortured with a passionate desire to die the same death, and I hated life. No matter where my shrinking eyes were turned, I saw a multitude of gruesome forms in ghastly attitudes bestrew the ground, scattered as rotten apples that have dropped from moving branches, or as acorns thick around a gnarled oak. Lift up your eyes, behold that holy temple, unto Jove long dedicated. What availed the prayers of frightened multitudes, or incense burned on those devoted altars? In the midst of his most fervent supplications, the husband, as he pled for his dear wife, or the fond father for his stricken son, would suddenly, before a word prevailed, die clutching at the altars of his gods, while holding in his stiffened hand a spray of frankincense still waiting for the fire. How often sacrificial bulls have been brought to those temples, and while white-robed priest was pouring offered wine between their horns, have fallen without waiting for the stroke. While I prepared a sacrifice to Jove, for my behalf, my country and 3 sons, the victim, ever moaning dismal sounds before a blow was struck, fell suddenly beside the altar, and his scanty blood ran thinly from the knives that slaughtered him. His entrails, wanting all the marks of truth, were so diseased, the warnings of the gods could not be read. The baneful malady had penetrated to the heart of life. And I have seen the carcasses of men lie rotting at the sacred temple gates, or by the very altars where they fell, making death odious to the living gods. And often I have seen some desperate man end life by his own halter, and so cheat by voluntary death his fear of death, in mad haste to outrun approaching fate. The bodies of the dead indecently were cast forth, lacking sacred funeral rites as hitherto the custom. All the gates were crowded with processions of the dead. Unburied they might lie upon the ground, or else deserted on their lofty pyres with no one to